Okay, welcome to Satsang, everybody. Lovely day in December, and as they say, all there is consciousness, but it seems like nobody knows how to find it. So let's see what we can do. um, I thought I would mention something too, just right out the gate, and just as a group thing. But in today's I Am That was basically a set of recordings. And it was done in the early part of Nisargadatta's career, as it were. And actually, Diane has a PDF I think she's going to share at some point that's even earlier yet. But what happens is that today's is about witnessing. So it's the 10th chapter. But what I'm finding is that there isn't a movement towards depth here. Actually, there is this is material that you'll recognize pretty immediately, because it's something we've talked about already. So it's just the basic movement towards witnessing. So understand, we'll talk a little bit about that. And then what I did was I'm coupling that up with chapter 19 in the Pointers from Nisargadatta, where he takes a bit of a different approach to talking about an expansion, if you will, of this mistaken identity by pointing out the objectivization into consciousness of everything. So I picked that chapter as a bit of a more deep dive from the witnessing chapter. And so what I thought I'd just say is that as we go along here, if I run into more of these and I feel like it's a retrograde, as it were, I may look for something that I think probably the group will grab onto a bit more, because this is, as I said, this is a very basic piece. So but it's fun. It's still, I mean, it's always worth going back and taking a look at it, So if you look at chapter 10, the first thing that happens is that the questioner comes in and he says, I'm full of desires and I want them fulfilled. And it's kind of a funny conversation, because he says, how am I to get what I want? Nisargadatta says, well, you work for fulfillment, you put in the energy and wait for the results. And he says, well, that's a really great idea, but I'm kind of lazy. Um, so I found that just to be kind of a humorous approach to asking a question. I want my desires fulfilled. How do I do it? Well, the basic you work towards. And we say, yeah, is there a different way? Because I'm kind of a lazy guy, as it turns around, as it turns. I'm lazy when it comes to action. He said, well, he goes on and he just says that your desire is not clear. And then the questioner says, well, what about unselfish desires? And he says, well, when you desire, now think about this. He says, when you desire the common good, the whole world desires with you. Make humanity's desire your own and work for it. There you cannot fail. Now, that's a very famous quote from Nisargadatta. And I just want to point something out here, is that that quote is contextual. You're really only going to tell somebody that who's at the very beginning of their, right? Because later you're going to see he unwinds the whole thing about serving humanity when he gets into Ramesh's pointers. But that's, of course, now at the back end of his teaching, he's really started to say, I'm not going to take questions any longer that are pure egoic. So, so just remember, when you see this particular quote, which you will, for some reason, this seems to be one that gets out. You see it in memes and everything. It's a very contextual quote, which of course is incredibly celebrated among all of the folks that aren't Advaitins and don't really look into this material, because it gets into our modern world about, say, it's saving the world stuff. So it fits really nicely. It fits really nicely with that. But that wasn't the. This was just a stepping stone. So as you go along, he says, what does it mean to know myself? So there's the question. Of course, Nisargadatta is going to point out that the self that he thinks he is, right, is the mistaken identity. That's what he's going to immediately go after. And he says, how do I come to know that? And he says, well, this is an easy one, all that you are not. Right? Why does he tell him that? Well, because the mistaken identity is all that he thinks he is. So what he wants him to do is take a look into all that he thinks he's not. Well, he says, and not what I am, question mark. And he says, what you are, you already are. By knowing what you are not, you are free of it. That's the stepping stone. And remain in your own natural state. It all happens quite spontaneously and effortlessly. And he says, and what do I discover? I love this one. Well, he says, you discover there's nothing to discover. You are what you are, and that is all. But ultimately, what am I? The questioner says. He says, the ultimate denial of all that you are not. That's what you are. He says, I don't understand, which which shouldn't surprise anybody, right? He says, it is your fixed idea that you must be something or other that blinds you, right? It's that idea. If you trust me, believe me when I tell you that you are the pure awareness that illumines consciousness and its infinite content. So realize this and live accordingly. If you do not believe me, go within, inquiring, what am I? Or focus your mind on I am, which is pure and simple being. Interesting, right? You don't find him that often, telling somebody to go in and do the inquiry of what am I, which is the Ramana inquiry. Or the other thing, of course, is his version, which is to, in essence, focus your mind on the I am. So that's always going to be one of Nisargadatta's pieces. And he says, watch over your thoughts, your words, and your actions. This will clear your vision. Um, and he says, but you already told me that I am the supreme reality. Is it not self-knowledge? And he goes, of course, you are the supreme reality, but what of it? Every grain of sand is God. He says, to know it is important, but it is only the beginning. So he's really clear. He's really clear here. Hey, this is just the beginning of everything. So now he gets into the witnessing. So it took all of that conversation, as you see, to get to the first piece where now he's going to talk to him about witnessing. He says, I told you already. He says, discover all you're not, bodies, feelings, thoughts, ideas, space, being, not being, this or that. Nothing concrete or abstract that you can point to as you. He said, a mere verbal statement will not do. You may repeat a formula endlessly without any result whatsoever. You must watch yourself particularly, continuously, particularly your mind, moment by moment, missing nothing. This witnessing is essential for the separation of the self from the not self. So there's your witnessing and the very basic introduction to witnessing. So it's a really beautiful thing. Now it's interesting. He goes, the witnessing isn't not my real nature. He goes, for witnessing, there must be something else to witness. We are still in duality. So there you go. So the witnessing is is your is not your real nature, as Nisargadatta would call it out. Because remember, you've got that word real in there, which in the Eastern version means eternal, everlasting, all of that. If it lives in duality, it's not that. It's not going to have that eternal nature to it. Now, I am going to point you to uh, the very last little piece here in that chapter because I always chuckle about this because it reminds me of the threads that you see in the non-duality groups, right? Because we now have, if Nisargadatta wrote a comment into one of those threads, this is what it would be. He goes, what about witnessing the witness, awareness of awareness? And Nisargadatta's response is, putting words together will not take you far. Go within and discover what you are. Nothing else matters. So that's the that there's your answer for those that are trying to decide the difference between consciousness and awareness of awareness and witnessing of witnessing and all of what you see. And what you see when you see that is the it's the propensity in the West especially to move into parsing. That it's the I always tell the story about being in India and putting together the theory of everything. Because in this mind, if I could get to the theory of everything, obviously something grand was going to happen. Now, where in the world would I have gotten that idea? Right? I mean, think about that for a minute. I mean, that's a pretty kind of a big load of work to be doing, thinking that, in fact, never doubting there was a payoff. If I do this, there's a payoff, right? And that's the propensity um, to the sense that a perfectly organized intellectual concept is the payoff. And so just see that in your own conditioning. That's the place that it matters. And you'll see, it's funny after being in India and sitting with Ramesh and actually being in the kind of sense of things in a world where seeking is commonplace. Um, I I was shocked at how quickly non-duality became a thing and how fast it basically ran off the road. I'm not sure which happened first, that the West discovered non-duality, certainly in the social media world, or it became an intellectual exercise. But because one followed the other, just as sure as night follows day, it was fast, very fast. So go ahead, Dan. You're on mute still.
I didn't. Okay. Are you saying that you don't know when it started in the West and where it ran off the way?
Well, what surprised me is that so years ago, uh, back, Michael can probably tell you what the years were, but we created a website and we bent it towards the non-dual. At that point in time on social media, I'm not sure anybody knew what non-duality or Advaita was, to be honest with you. It was that obscure still yet. And I'm thinking that was back around what, 2012 maybe, Michael, some 11, 10, 12, somewhere in there, right? So not that long ago. Today, you can go into social media, and I mean the non-dual groups have thousands and thousands and thousands of people. I mean, there is no doubt that it has been discovered in a way that's so much, grander than it ever was in the days when Michael and I were, working with this particular website. So, what I noticed was all of a sudden it exploded in the social media world, that feature of it, right? And it was, and I thought, and I remember thinking to myself, oh, cool, right? And then I remember it was, I think within days, I read one of the threads and I went, no, whoa, no, 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 no. I mean,
Exactly.
yeah, it blew up and ran off the road. I mean, almost simultaneously. So just notice that the actual nature of witnessing, watching the work, as it were, the work of movement is vastly underappreciated in our culture. And so it's so folks that are non-dualists spend a lot of time talking about non-duality.
Hey, Alan, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So we're talking about witnessing, and then he says, well, that we're still talking about duality.
Uh-huh.
So, is there, how would you speak about a witnessing that's other than duality?
Well, at a certain point, there is not an object of observation any longer, right?
There's no subject that is
So yeah, there's no observer
doing
and no
observing.
observed. That which is what creates duality. Those become one thing.
So so the activity of observing oneself, you are the observer and you're also the observed.
Correct. And what happens is that dyad, if you will, collapses in awakening.
Okay.
Okay. So that's that. So when he said, but you're still in duality, when he's talking about witnessing, he's talking about that watching happens as an act of duality, observer and observed, just as you said, where in essence both roles are being played within the same body mind, as it were, within the same consciousness.
So when you say it collapses, then I don't know that I know that experience. I know the experience of observing
Yep.
consciousness, observing mind, observing actions. I know that experience.
Yeah.
So when you say collapsing, I'm not quite sure I know what that means, but by experience.
But those are
Yep.
those wonderful, wonderful glimpses we get.
Yep.
That witnessing is that wonderful glimpse that we get of something different. That there is, you know, and I think we've talked about before, my teacher saying, well, just wait till there's the witness that's witnessing the wit. And it just goes on and on. But that's the same as Ramana saying, who are you? Who am I? Well, that's just a concept. Go behind that. That's a concept. Go behind that. And it's still that you gotta go. It's like a spiral. I don't know. You can say it in so many different words that mean nothing. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's still
So
an identity if it's a witness.
and
So
and
that's
there's a felt separation, if you will, that actually, continues to inhabit or continues to occupy the movement. When that felt separation falls, that's the collapse. When I use the word collapse, that's what I'm talking about, is that boundary.
The only thing I know possibly is when there's a certain kind of witnessing, it'll open into a smile inside of me. And in that smile, there feels like maybe that's a certain collapsing. There's just this kind of joy of being that happens in that moment. I don't know if that's what you're talking about.
Well, it definitely is I think it's definitely a sense that goes with that for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a fairly apt um, response internally to that for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't you think that as you get maybe more accustomed to uh, witnessing the thoughts in your mind or witnessing what your body seems to be doing, that there there a sort of a blank space. This is not the best way to put it, perhaps. A blank space sort of seems to rise, so that the duality of observing, there's nothing to observe because there's no observer anymore. It's all one thing. And I really like that quote that you mentioned earlier with Nisargadatta, because the first time I read this book, I circled that and put 2 stars next to it. You must watch yourself continuously, particularly your mind, moment by moment, missing nothing. This witnessing is essential for the separation of the self from the not self. I love that quote. And it hit me for even when I first got the book decades ago. And I'm really happy to hear this again, because it kind of buttresses what I've been doing, and reminds me that I don't always do it in this way. So I hope that is valuable to somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. And as I say, I mean, when it comes to talking about the arising of awakening, all you can do is continue whatever the journey is that you're on, and then whatever arises. As I said, as he says, it
Yeah.
happens quite naturally and effortlessly.
A lot of times there's just a wave of joy that goes right with it too.
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
that part.
I can always remember Osho. He was very famous for saying somebody would tell him an experience like Joseph just did, and then he'd look at him and he'd smile and he'd go, "Keep going."
Yeah.
That was the response. So keep going.
And free samples help too.
Yeah, yeah. And as I say, the free samples are a wonderful thing. So now what's interesting is that when you move into the final years of Nisargadatta he receives a question, a similar question. He takes it to kind of a new place, if you will. He said, so now remember when he talks in the beginning about spending your time saving humanity. So in this one, he uses that because somebody comes in and says that to him. Now to assume that you're going to be in service and save humanity, that's clearly a autonomous doer who's operating in service of humanity, right? So in essence, he's at a very similar place. The fellow that comes in, and I won't read the first page and a half, but he's experienced with Nisargadatta, and whenever he gets a little shaky, he comes back to get some more. So he's come back to get a little bit more this time. And he says his basic question was, and this is on the second page, by the way, page 54, about a third of the way down. He goes, can a man honestly afford to spend his time absorbed in meditation on the self? So he's heard what the answer is meditation on the self. That's his idea of witnessing, to the exclusion of the many social and political problems in the country and the world. So that's his basic question. So Nisargadatta starts and he goes, well, let's deal with the matter. He goes, you and I, he said, you and I now. He said, there have been numerous great personalities and avatars in the world during the past 2 to 3,000 years. He said, each one of them have laid down a list of do's and don'ts depending on his own concept of right and wrong and the needs of the times as he saw them. Um, yeah, so far, so good. Let us now ask ourselves a question. What have all these great men and avatars achieved? Have they been able to make the slightest change in the behavior of man or nature? Right? So the answer to that is no. So where does he go with that? That's a really great start. He said, well, there must be a reason that there's been no movement. I wonder what that reason is. Some fundamental reason why they have not been successful. Could it be that the problem itself has been misperceived, or misconceived, right? Could it be that attacking the problem directly was like attacking the heads of the Hydra, which, when cut off, are replaced instantly by others? And that the only way to decimate the Hydra was to locate its heart and strike there. Now, we've talked about that before, the direct and indirect approach, right? That when you're dealing with problems of the ego, those dissolve, but what happens is you get a 31 flavors line with a number in hand, the next problem takes the place. The direct is to deal with the ego itself, right? To deal with the ticket taker, right? So that's that same kind of an idea. He said, so let's reduce the problem to the essentials. I and you representing millions of people and the physical world. Now here's where he starts to dive deep. You're going to get your thinking caps on. On analyzing these basic essentials, what do we find? He said, all me's and you's in the earth, the sky, the moon, and the stars. Are they not conceptual image? Are they not mere conceptual images in consciousness? You see, so he takes this to the place of saying, trying to solve problems with mere conceptual images in consciousness solves no problems. So similar to what we were talking about before, about the theory of everything. Assembling the theory of everything is assembling another conceptual image in consciousness. That's why that's why there's no payoff. So you get to be with all these. The nice thing about that, though, is if you undertake that, you get to be placed in the paragraph of all the great avatars and sages in the world. So I guess you get to be in a nice category of people who thought they could do something about it and couldn't. But there you go. There you go. He said, all existence is objective. All the me's and you exist as one another's objects in consciousness that cognizes them. And so far as the world and the universe is concerned, is it in essence any different from the world which you create in your dream? Or more accurately, the world that gets created in your dream consciousness and is made of the same ingredients and inhabited by the same kind of people, including yourself, as in what you call the real world. Your real world, you might say, had been existing long before you were born. Well, in your dream world, there are also seas and mountains and buildings and people which have been obviously existing for a long, long time. Are you going to solve the many social and political problems of all the people in your personal dream? So notice how he goes after that. It's like the world you live in is the same kind of a dream as any other dream you have. The only difference is you have decided to take the one that appears in consciousness that seems to have some solidity, right? You've taken that to be different from the dream that you have when you wake up. Because when you wake up, guess what? It's seen that it's a dream. Now, there's a theme there. I'll let you go ahead and run with that and project that out. He said, so is it not true? Um, the root of the problem is consciousness in which the entire manifested universe appears. And is it not in consciousness on which the entire attention should be directed? So rather than saving the people in your dream, maybe what we ought to look at is how consciousness in its misperceived or conceived state is where the issue is and what it is you're fighting with. He says, since it is consciousness in which the entire phenomenal world appears, it necessarily follows that all manifestation will become sensorially perceptible only as if it is extended spatially and for a certain duration of time, space and time. One must therefore necessarily accept the purely conceptual existence of the psychic apparatus of space-time as a prerequisite for the perception of manifested universe. Right? So in essence, what he's saying is that manifestation there's a certain extension that allows for time and space to make the movie viewable, right? You need time and space or the movie can't be seen. And that in a certain way, by the way, Joseph, is a bit of the answer to your question, which is all there is the here and now. So the difference in witnessing is that witnessing is in time and space, and within the collapse, timelessness arises. There's no longer that piece in there. Now we're going to you'll build a lot of little pieces around that, but that's one of it. He said that leads us to the following conclusions, and this is one of the only places I've seen where Nisargadatta lays it out in this particular way. And for those philosophy geeks, you'll enjoy this. It's because we use words like phenomenon and noumenon, and it's fun.
What page are you on now?
I'm now on page 55. So at the
Okay.
very bottom of
Thank you.
55, he said, this leads us to the following conclusions. Without the concept of space-time, the manifested universe would not be sensorially perceptible. And therefore, all events based on cause and effect and extended in space-time must also be only conceptual. Right? So if the extension is only conceptual, all that happens within it is also conceptual. He said, If the manifested universe is only an appearance, in the absence of consciousness, the universe cannot exist on its own, then the manifested universe is the reflection of something that is present in its own right. Okay, step two, right? You see, you kind of feel like you're in trouble here, right? Does anybody perceive that he's leading us down the rabbit hole? He said, phenomena then are the objective aspect of the noumenon, the total potentiality, the totality of the known in the infinite of the unknown. Consciousness cannot be used to transcend consciousness, and therefore noumenon represents the outside parameter of cognition. Interesting. That's one that I actually hadn't read that last sentence until I started getting ready for this, and I go, I've got to really, I've got to work on that one a little bit. That's an interesting little commentary. But nonetheless, that's where he's taking us. What we are is the noumenon. That's that when he steps that fellow in the first piece, right? He's now attacking this from several different places in terms of the falsity of the identity that one thinks they are. He's basically revealing the falseness of the identity of all that is. Well, if what you are is all that is, then revealing the falseness of the identity of yourself, the little volitional autonomous doer, which is where you start with definition, as you expand that definition to everything else, right? Saying I am all that is, right, reduces itself to saying absolutely nothing from what I can tell. So that's an interesting observation on the way to the circus.
So noumenon is noumenon is this all possibility,
Hmm.
all potentiality, which is different than phenomena, which is actually manifested.
Correct.
So noumena,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
no manifestation. There's only potential. There's only possibility.
And it even kind of steps down from there because one of the important pointers that they talk about is all you know is that you exist, right?
Mhm.
All you know is that existence is. The rest is interpretation.
Yeah, but is existence a concept also?
Well, it is. It is, but you're working your way beyond that. What you're doing when you're speaking in this way is you're dissolving the concepts that you hold, including existence. So existence gets dissolved on the way. But what I was going back and pointing to is that you were talking about the unconscious and all of the potentiality. So it's the totality of the known within the totality of the unknown, right? That's what's going on. I was stepping it down to the existence of the individual and how that gets dissolved, which is to say, we know that the intellect and the mind can't track all of the occurrences within the totality of phenomenon, right? That's clear, right? I mean, there are millions and billions of transactions in every microsecond that there's no way that can be tracked. So the best that can happen is some extraction, excluding a mass majority of what has actually happened in order to create a story,
Wow.
right? So what you are as a story is even a step down from from noumenon to phenomenon to cognizable, if you will, phenomenon, right? To understanding that the best you can do is have a story. So what do we know? We know the one thing that is known is that existence is,
Which
right?
is the only thing that has never changed.
That's correct.
It's constant, never change, always the same.
I've noticed that, especially lately, that if I'm paying attention to what's going on in the world, I can see the incredible mass of um, chaos, you know. And when I have a free sample or my attention goes to the self, whatever you want to call it, all of a sudden, chaos is irrelevant and is unnecessary. But but when I see things as chaotic, I realize that the small self of Brad is participating in the chaos, and therefore it seems to be everywhere.
Yeah.
It's an interesting juxtaposition, man, and I'm really enjoying it because it's like when I feel chaos, I'm looking in the wrong direction.
Well, and just recognize that what that comes from is the habit of meaning. And you could buy all of these books where, that celebrate, man's, what man is above all is an animal that can, participate in meaning. But it's that very meaning that sentences one to, because the only meaning that man can create is meaning that actually emerges from a paltry piece of everything that is. So the best that's going to happen is going to be a
Yeah,
piece of that particular story. And and recognize that meaning, when we talk about it, when we talk about a lot of stuff, it gets spoken of conceptually, but it doesn't get grounded is probably as great of a word as I can use. Because what pulls you into feeling what chaos is happening is that you have meaning, but it's identified meaning. So it's not just an intellectual observation, right? It's an actual sense of jarring and all of what goes with the chaos when it arises, right? I
oh
mean,
yeah, oh yeah.
there's an actual happening, if you will, within consciousness. So meaning actually lives in the arising of the felt experience of an ego. That's where the identification and attachment lives.
I
It really is glue. It's held by the mind and can be described by the mind, but it's in operation in the arising. The the duality, the separation that we feel, right? Because really what you're saying, Brad, is that there's no such thing as separation.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Well, the beauty of the chaos is that it's a for me it's a pointer that you're putting your attention in the wrong direction. You know,
Exactly.
you're looking at the wrong way. You're and that's like an ongoing pointer for me because if I feel like I'm surrounded by chaos, which is easy to do, what are you looking at, man? You're looking at the effects, not the cause. And
Well, you're likely making meaning,
yeah, okay,
right?
I'll go with that too.
That's
Sure.
that's what I'm saying. In other words, separation is separation because meaning makes it so.
It's
Right.
useful, I think, in chaotic situations. I can only think of this from my mathematical mind. Is I know that with chaos theory, mathematically, there is pattern in chaos. There's repetition, there's pattern, there's beautiful kinds of things, the Mandelbrot set and the this and that's, so there's a pattern. So when chaos happens, which it always does, right? Something is always like, well, then to look for that pattern, it kind of brings that piece of, oh, well, this is just the same thing that's always happened. It's always going on. And within this phenomenon, it will always go on because that's just what this is. It's just nothing but chaos, even in the most peaceful of moments, I think. A lot of times there's chaos.
Yeah,
But even to make that statement is bringing in meaning.
Exactly.
it is. That's what I said. So so all when I say all that you know is that existence is, or that and the rest is interpretation. The rest is interpretation, right? It's a story. It's a constructed piece. So this kind of fits into the last piece. So noumenon is the fourth piece of what he talks about. And he says, noumenon, that which is, can only be, and it can only be now. In the absence of the conceptual space-time, there can absolutely be nowhere or when for anything to be. Now, when we see that the world, problems wherein are to be solved, is only an appearance, let us get back to the me's and you's who are supposed to solve the world's problems. Before we start to identify the world's problems and proceed to solve them, should we not identify ourselves? Right? So he's going to take you right back. He's going to take you right back to where he was in the very simple piece that we read in the very beginning. Right? This is just this is just a way of taking away. Right? He's if you see what Nisargadatta does, he takes it away, takes it away, takes it away. So rather than the simple explanation which he used, which was just watch who you are as an egoic definition, here he says, well, let's just take the whole world away. We'll take it all away, right? And where do you arrive? In essence, in the same place, right? He says, um, what is the human body? It's actually nothing but a psychosomatic apparatus capable of doing anything other than producing illusory images and interpretations. Right? By the way, notice that when you talk now about illusion and you use this as an entry into that, that it makes a lot more sense, right? In other words, because you can get really into a fight about what's an illusion and what's not an illusion. So that's just something really, really nice to know. He said, so appears as oneself in the dream with an independent identity is clearly seen on a review after waking to be totally devoid of any independent substance, a mere puppet being manipulated, right? So I always remember um, only Osho when somebody would say, "I don't understand the nature of the source. I don't understand the nature of source." And he said, "Oh, it's like this." He says, "It has its hand up your ass, and you're a puppet, and it's doing this."
Yeah.
And if you ever saw Osho do that, you'll never forget it in your life. But that was his way of trying to describe to somebody what what it was, what's source. So he says, if this position is perceived directly and intuitively, then we know that in relativity we are the conscious presence. You see where he's come all the way back to say what we are is the conscious presence. We see the false as false. The problem resolves itself. We are the content of this living dream, actors in this living drama, and actors can only play their roles and nothing more. Now, the very last two sentences, um, take notice because he's now, as you can tell, he's wandered off and he's really kind of developed something here. The distinguished visitor heard Maharaj in a baffled silence. He had no words to express what he thought or felt. And I'm guessing after Nisargadatta launched into that, that might be the normal response. Certainly this compared. So when you do this, when you do this, take a look at the two of them and see where what happens when we start to talk about the depth, because now we're taking it all apart, right?
But
The
then
whole.
the second, so he says we're all actors in this living drama, and
Yes.
that's all we ever are. That's all anyone ever is.
Correct, but the idea that I mean, Ramesh was always famous for saying it would be as though the actors on a page of a script said, "No, no, no, I want to do this." Right? Just the actors just simply follow the script. So whatever is going to be said is said. That's the point. Is that so when you speak about one being lived into the moment, right? There's not the meaning that says that I am a autonomous doer, right? That felt sense of autonomous doership, it drops when all there is the recognition that one is lived into every moment. All of that doing and all of that activity are in essence um, worthless. Or well, yeah, they're worthless. They're not necessary.
Great distillation.
Diane, you can say
Well,
something?
because not only am I not the actor of Diane or the but I am Joseph and Alan and Michael, and it's
Yeah,
all encompassing.
right. And eventually what happens is that itself collapses. There you
Yeah.
go. It's gone. That's gone. So he's the one that when somebody said, well, what is it? What's happening in that situation? Like you've got absolute awareness. What is it aware of in that collapsed place? And he said, absolute awareness, unaware of anything. Because there isn't anything. Awareness takes duality for it to operate. Aware of, right? There has to be an arising that awareness participates in, right? But when there's no arising, when all of that is collapsed, and the place before that is the recognition that it's all one thing, right? Then it's awareness, unaware of itself, is how he would say it. And you ought to see what they do on the threads with that one. That's a fun one to watch. So anyway.
I don't want to.
I don't know what there's something about all of that grabbed my attention because it was um there's a well-meaningness to it all, but then it devolves into a food fight. So of course then you're kind of like going, okay, but nonetheless it grabbed my attention. So anyway, all right, any questions or comments anybody wants to jump in and make?
There's so many ways that can compare, the self capital S, or what we are in essence, with the details of it. But I used to something that worked for me that I just noticed. I felt like I was a robot with opinions. You know, I'm being run through this program and I have an opinion about it, but I'm still being run by the
Yeah,
program.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's like that little story I tell about Disneyland and driving the car, right?
Oh yeah, the Autopia. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Go to Autopia, turn the wheel's not connected to anything. That's what I find so lovely. It's this image of a car with a wheel and it's not connected to anything.
Yeah, man.
It runs on tracks. So when it turns to the right and the kid's turning it to the right, he goes, "What a great driver I am."
Yeah.
When he turns it to the right and it goes left, he goes, "I need a remedial driving course." Right? It all gets reduced to what
Yeah.
that little child driver, the doer, the autonomous doer, is accumulating within the mind, right? And
Yeah.
the reality is all he is a robot with opinions. His opinions happen to be about whether he's driving well or not so well, but those are the opinions he's having. You get advanced, right?
Yeah.
Because the advanced version of that is you can identify the assholes that are driving around you. And if you're from Southern California, you're really good at that. I
There's
want
plenty
you
of those. Yeah.
yeah, like we live in a primer of identifying asshole drivers. That's kind of what we do in California. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I figured that out when I had my daughter, my oldest. I don't know if she was 2 years old. And she's in the back in the car seat, and I take a swerve, and all I hear from the back seat is asshole. I'm like,
I
oops.
love it.
Been driving with that a little too much. Anyway.
So, Alan, did you ever have the experience of being so? I mean, I think most everyone does, but doesn't recognize it for what it perhaps actually is. where you're so engrossed in what you're doing, like you said you were a businessman, or when writing your book or whatever, that all of a sudden you look at the clock and you realize that 3 hours has gone by and where did it go? And you didn't even realize that that time had gone anywhere because you were so, to me, those are those glimpses, keys to the natural self. You are in the moment. You don't have time.
Yeah.
You don't have, so those are those little glimpses of, you know,
Nisargadatta used to call that, he would say time eats us until it turns around and we eat time.
yeah.
Which was his version of the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it was sitting at my silver bench.
Yeah.
I mean, I could be there for 5 hours working on something and then go, oh my God, I haven't even eaten. I didn't even,
Exactly.
I mean, I'm just, and to me, that was a glimpse of the essence, the natural,
And most of the time, if you actually just take a second, you'll see that you're being lived in those moments. It's just
exactly.
it's just moving through you, so to speak. The body mind is doing what the body mind does. It's just
Yep.
happening.
Yep.
There's not really a lot of thought as to how that's you know, if one stops to think about how that's happening,
Then it's,
you're back into that other
yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but the question that the guy asks about, do we be involved in the world that's going on
Yeah.
or not? I mean, some people are involved in the world in a political kind of way, and that's
Sure.
just their nature.
Yes.
And that's not my nature. So,
Yes.
so in a sense, we can say we're all actors in this living drama, but we all play we're a different part in it.
That's what Shakespeare
Sure.
said.
So I think that the distinction there is only as to the identification piece, right? So there isn't don't be naturally involved in how life wants to live you because you'll see a comment. He didn't have it in this one, but it's always like find out who you are first, and then if the world needs to be saved and you're going to be part of that, that will happen.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
is exactly what you're saying.
Yes.
So
Exactly.
you'll find where that is a part of what they, it's not to exclude that great things should happen, like or those kinds of things. I love dogs. I don't think it's a big secret about that. So like you can imagine. I mean, I probably look like some humanitarian when it comes to dogs, but that's just because there's a incredible caring for dogs. So so those are the causes that get supported. Someone, all of that happens. I'm here to tell you that there's nothing quite that sublime going on within this particular body mind, but that's probably how it looks.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
but also
seems.
I think I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Diane.
No, you go ahead.
Okay,
I've
thank
said
you.
enough.
It just seems like he's like when he sort of broke into the more philosophical segment, he's it seemed, and I think that this is sort of what was just said, but I'm doing my best to understand it myself. He's just saying that if your attention is focused on the outside world, then you're identifying with being the doer of what you're doing. And therefore the experience is tense and probably not working. But if you focus on the fact that you're beyond even consciousness, then it's just a doing that's happening. So if that's the direction that you're going in, you're operating in a pure motion towards it. Something like that.
Perfectly said. Yep.
But
Yep.
I think also to keep in mind, if you're going to use that phenomenon, it's like the going beyond, there is nowhere to go. But the nomenon, that word, is, I think, what Nisargadatta meant when he said that, in the I am that,
Yep.
which,
Absolutely.
still, because it's a word, means really nothing, but we have
That's
these
that's what
words.
he's pointing to. Yeah. Yeah. So and Tanner, you can seek out, with your Kundalini background and everything, you'll relate to this, but the when the perfect movement and consciousness at the body mind level is accompanied by the perfect movement of everything else that it lives within, there's no way to distinguish the difference between those two. So, right, but I'm saying that not as an intellectual saying, but as in the felt experience of movement itself. That's what I was after, was, because what I find is that we talk about, like, even this, we're talking about phenomenon and noumenon, but he works hard to try to reduce it to that felt experience, as it were. And I find that is a really difficult gap to engage with. It's hard to have a philosophical discussion and come out of it, for whatever reason, feeling like you're connected to the movement, and that you feel like you and all that arises is all the same thing.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
are not.
So it's a hard. So I like that you brought it up the way you did, because that emphasizes the movement, the simple movement of being lived.
Yeah, because if I can sit here all day long and like discursively think it out and
Correct.
go, okay, I get it. But then if my attention is focused on that, it's not happening here.
Yep. And it's that dichotomy, I think, that constantly is at play, because what's happening is that you're essentially saying, hey, we're using pointers, right? So the idea is that they are pointers, but we don't use pointers in our, for, however old you and I both are, we've got plenty of road wear, right? So we have a way of dealing with that, which is mental description, if you will, right? And they're not, we don't think in pointers, and yet this is what that's based on. So it's the hop over from the pointers into the what is itself that I find is the challenge of this whole conversation.